everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're gonna do a hack. We're gonna hack a pattern. We're gonna hack one of my patterns. We're gonna just modify a pattern real quick to make it useful in other types of materials. Today, we're gonna make the fully lined fabric version, no clear vinyl version of the mini picnic pouch purse crossbody. So you can see this is a fully lined, full fabric, like I said, no clear vinyl version of the mini picnic pouch, which we went over a couple weeks ago. So to refresh your memory, this is the mini picnic pouch, which is actually a miniature version of the picnic pouch. So if you're confused here, let me just try to make this as easy as possible. The picnic pouch is a free video with measurements in the description of the video so you can make this. So no pattern, no purchasing of a pattern is required to make this bag. Now, if you want the written instructions and all the diagrams and all that, then the pattern is available for purchase. But if you just want the measurements of this larger picnic pouch and the video instructions, that's all available. I'll have the video link down below. However, this was so popular, people asked for smaller sizes, so we came out with a miniature version of it, and we also made it a little optional crossbody. You could keep it as just a pouch, or you could add some handles and make it a crossbody version. Now, the measurements and all of the information and instructions for this are available in the pattern. So you will have to purchase the pattern to make the miniature version. You do not have to purchase it to make the larger version. But when I was playing with this idea, I was like, hey, wouldn't it be cute if we like pinched the top a little bit to kind of give it like a boxy bag effect? And that is where this cute little version came from. So you see, it's the same exact thing as this one with a couple of tweaks to create this pinched look. So full written instructions, printable pattern pieces, diagrams, all of that for this bag, and this bag are all available in one discounted pattern. It's a $6 pattern and it gives you instructions for all of this. So hopefully that helps clear up that. But once this video came out, I had quite a few people say, I love it, I hate clear vinyl. Can you figure out a way to do it without clear vinyl? So I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. So this is a pouch version of that, okay? So it doesn't have the handles, it doesn't have the crossbody. It is bonded nylon on the exterior. You still need a little bit of vinyl for the ends. And then you can see we just leave the top open like this, fully lined on the inside. Very quick, very easy. The pattern piece for a full panel like this is available in the pattern, okay? It's like a bonus pattern piece at the very end. We have templates for it as well. You could also make a two-tone version of this, which you know how much I love a two-tone bag. So this is using the pattern pieces for the clear vinyl version, the clear vinyl two-tone version, but instead of clear vinyl on the top, I just used the fabric. This is a bonded nylon, and then on the bottom, I used vinyl. And then on the inside, it's once again fully lined with water-resistant canvas. I added the handles to this. I added a crossbody strap. You have a lot of options, okay? Now, I do want to mention that this is a hack. This fabric version, this is not how the pattern was originally written. It is a hack. So at time of filming, there are not written instructions for the fabric version in the pattern. That might change depending if I get requests for it or not. But the video tutorial I'm providing you today gives you all the information you need. It is a very simple tweak, just a couple of little things you got to take into account whenever, specifically for like handle placement. But other than that, it's very easy to build this bag, okay? So I would say it is much easier to build. I would say the easiest one is this. Fabric version, pinch top even, no handles. This is probably like the easiest beginner-friendly one. If you want to make it into a purse, this is also pretty easy. You just got to be careful with where you put your handles. We're going to go over that in detail. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, the only reason it's a challenge is because it's got clear vinyl, and clear vinyl can be sticky and a little bit challenging, so that's kind of the order. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through a single panel, so like one big panel, not two-tone, using quilting material, I know, and making it a purse with handles and with a crossbody strap. So we're gonna go over all the instructions on how to do that. You're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. What? This is so easy. I hope you love it. But if you do make one of these using the tutorial, please make sure you share it on social media or send me an email. I would love to see your version of this. If you have any questions whatsoever about this, leave a comment down below or you can email me. I'm Jessica@OklaRoots.com. And if you're like, you know what, I really would like the pictures and the written instructions added to the pattern for this fabric version because sometimes I just forget the little things I have to change, then just let me know and we can update the pattern again. We've already updated the pattern once to include the smaller version of the picnic pouch. I can update it again to include a few more instructions just to make it a little bit easier to make this little cutie patootie. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, like I said, leave them down below. Also, you can email me. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so for this fabric version, I'm going to use about a fat quarter of exterior material and a fat quarter of lining material and then some scraps of vinyl. So for my exterior material, I'm using a very lightweight fabric. Now, you can use a nylon, you can use vinyl, you can use all kinds of stuff for this, but I just wanted to show you making this bag with really lightweight material. This is Liberty of London. It's a lawn fabric. It's very drapey. It's actually nice for blouses and things like that. Popular with quilters, but I can make a cute little bag out of it. To add some stabilizer to this material, I actually quilted on some batting. So this is just, like 10-year-old batting that I have from when I used to make quilts. I just quilted it on to the material and then cut the pattern piece out. I'll show you that in just a moment. From my vinyl, I have this beautiful lavender vinyl from Tulip Bee, and this is just really gonna be for the ends and the handles and things like that. If you're just making a pouch version, you'll see that the only place you need vinyl is on these ends here. These are raw edge, so if you're doing this, you gotta have some sort of vinyl here, but that's it. That's the only place that you'll need it. However, if you're going to be doing the handles and the crossbody, you're gonna need some more vinyl. So just like this bag, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna have it on the ends right here. You can see I'm not doing the binding on the top, just the ends. And then I have my little connectors and my handle. And then I have a fun little fancy strap to go with that, which is pretty much what we're gonna do today. I'm showing you all this. This is a two-tone version. You can make the two-tone version using the two-tone templates, exactly the same. I'm just gonna do the one panel version to show you how you work with that. And then for my lining material, I wanted something lightweight to go with the exterior, so I'm using a water-resistant canvas. This is nice and lightweight, and it has structure, so it's like a easy to work with, great for domestic machines, but also provides some shape to the bag without adding any thickness to the seam. So I wanted to show you the two templates I'll be using for today's bag. This is the full main panel template. This is part of the printable. It is on the very last page. It was kind of added as a bonus. This can be used for the pattern today. We're gonna talk a little bit more about what this line on the bottom here is. If you have the printable, you're not gonna have the line on the bottom. You're gonna just have the shape. But I'm gonna walk you through what we use that for. You can still do this, it's just a 1/4 inch above. We'll talk about the necessity of this line in just a minute, but you will cut out your material using the full template. And then I'm gonna have the little top corner piece. I'm gonna do the fold over one. That's it. These are all part of the pattern. You can print them out and trace them, or you can use acrylic templates. Okay, so here's my hardware and other stuff. There's not a whole lot here. I will be making a crossbody strap. This is a fancy strap. We have a whole tutorial going over how to do this and using fabric or vinyl. I'm still gonna walk you through how to do it at the end of this video, so if you wanna see it all come together, you can. From my 1-inch wide webbing, I cut 52 inches of webbing, and then from that 52-inch cut, I cut off 10 inches. You can really play around with this. You need 2 pieces of webbing though for the fancy strap. Go to that part of the video if you just want to see how to do that. Then, just like the original pattern, I have a zipper tape that is at least 12 inches and a zipper pull. You do not have to attach the zipper pull at this time. Then we have our bag tag, 2 1/2-inch wide D-rings, a 1-inch wide rectangle ring, and a 1-inch wide strap slider. These are going to be for the crossbody strap. If you're doing the pouch, you don't really need any of this hardware. If you're doing just the pouch, not the purse version of this, you just need your zipper tape, your zipper pull, and that's really it. But I'm gonna be doing the purse version, so then I also have 2 1/2-inch wide swivel hooks. These do not match, do they? Okay, let's switch these out. I have got to go through my hardware. Okay, these 2 match, so we'll use those 2. But you see, if you want to do the purse crossbody version, you're gonna need your D-rings, you're gonna need your swivel hooks. I will be doing a fancy strap that uses a 1-inch wide webbing and goes down to 1/2-inch wide hardware. You do not have to use 1/2-inch wide swivel hooks. You could just make a regular strap with 1-inch wide swivel hooks and attach it. A 1-inch swivel hook can easily attach to a 1/2-inch D-ring, okay? You can mix and match this a lot. Also, if you're like, I don't have 1/2-inch wide D-rings, but I have 1-inch wide D-rings, go check out the original tutorial for this where I go through how to adjust the measurements to accommodate that, okay? Okay, so not a whole lot of other stuff today. I've got my thread, as always, through the top needle. I'm gonna be using a Wizardry Stitchery 45 weight thread in color Dusty Rose. In my bobbin, I have a Gutermann Mara, this is 100 weight. And then my needle of choice is a Microtex 8012. I do believe that the one I have in the needle right now is a 7010 because my material is very lightweight. I am going to be working with the 7010, but I'll let you know if I have any issues. If you're using lightweight material like just quilt cotton and things like that, you can really use the 7010 needle, which is thinner, more often used with quilting. If you start having the bulk, like when I start working with the vinyl top corners, I'm gonna have to switch to an 8012. So that's a long way to say I just prefer to use a Microtex 8012 all the time for bag making, regardless of the material. Then I have my turning wand to help poke out the corners, a couple of marking tools. I have an air erasing marker and a silver ink pen, a ruler as always. I like to always have two sizes of double-sided tape. I have 1/4 inch wide and 1/8 of an inch wide. Double-sided tape that's easy to sew over. You know, that you can get that really thick tape that's good for leather. Don't use that on your domestic machine. Then I have lots of plastic clips as always, a lighter to clean up all the loose threads, and a seam ripper. Okay, so let's go through our pattern pieces. There's not a lot here. I have my 2 exterior panels, and like I said, I've already quilted these. So I just laid my material over the batting, and to adhere it, I actually just laid my lawn material right side up over my batting, and I cut out pieces that were bigger than this because quilting material shrinks it. So don't cut these out first and then quilt it. Cut out a bigger rectangle than this with your batting and your material, then quilt that, then use the template, lay it over the big blob of quilted beautiful thing you have, and trace it and cut it out. So that's what I did here. And to adhere them together, I actually just ironed this material on top of the batting and they stuck together. So that's a little trick you can use with lightweight material. It kind of will just stick to batting. You don't have to use glue or pins for small projects like this. For a bigger project like a quilt, you need to use something else. So anyways, I have 2 cuts of this. Like I said, if you wanted to build the two-tone look, you definitely could. You could have a bottom piece and a top piece so you have that nice divide. That's perfectly fine as well. It'll end up the same size. And then I have 2 cuts of lining. Like I said, it's just a water-resistant canvas. And this is really it for like the material. So everything else here is going to be vinyl, some sort of raw edge material. It can be cork vinyl, anything like that. Just something that you can leave with raw edges. If you're just doing the pouch, so once again, this is the pouch version. No handles, no straps, just an adorable, beautiful pouch. All you need are these 2 ends here, okay? That's it. You don't need anything else. You just need these 2 ends and you're done. So super scrap friendly. If you're doing the handles and you want to make your own handles like I will be doing, I have 2 handle cuts here and these are going to end up being 1/2 inch wide handles. Then I have my little handle connectors down here. These are like the tabs that are going to wrap around the end of this. And then I have my D-ring connectors. So these are all for just the cute little handles on the purse. Then over here, I have the cuts for my fancy strap. So again, totally optional if you just want to put a strap on it that you've already made, or you don't want to do a fancy strap, you don't have to. But if you want to follow along with the fancy strap, I have 2 of my rounded 1 inch to 1/2 inch fancy strap cuts, and then 2 rectangles to go around the ends. All right, so let's take a moment to discuss the difference in this version versus the clear vinyl version. So let's visualize this for a moment. When you make the clear vinyl version of this bag, this top edge here is going to just lay right over the edge of the zipper and be basted on and then covered with binding, okay? So when you do that and you pull this up, you're losing a 1/4 of an inch from the top edge, all right? That's how much is being taken in the seam, is a 1/4 of an inch. However, when we do a fabric version, we're going to sew the zipper down and then flip it over. So you see we're losing twice that. We're losing about 1/2 of an inch from where the edge of the zipper is underneath this from the top of the fold here, okay? So we need to pay attention to that when we do our placement for our straps. If you're not adding straps, you can just skip this little talk altogether. In my opinion, if you were to use this template, lay it over here as is, and mark placement for your straps using this handy dandy little placement mark, which is also on the printable, your straps are going to be very close to the zipper. And I don't think that that would be easy to sew. So my tip is if you're going to mark placement for your straps right now before we get started, or even add the straps on right now before we get started, you need to add them a bit lower, which is why we have this line down here. If you have the acrylic template, right here on the bottom, there's an engraved line. All you have to do is line up that line with the bottom edge of your main panel here. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a two-tone version or a single panel version. So can you see down here, I have a 1/4 inch hanging off from my template. That's how I'm going to mark placement for my straps. So now I still have those little holes here to mark placement, and I can just mark those dots and I'm good to go. That's where my straps go. I'm not gonna be worried about them getting sucked into the seam or just being too close to the zipper in the end. If you don't have the acrylic templates, you just have the paper templates, then what you'll do instead is pretend this is the paper template. You're gonna grab a ruler. You're going to measure down a 1/4 inch from the top edge, line up your paper template with that 1/4 inch bit. You just need a 1/4 inch hanging above here, and then mark your points. So either one will work. The acrylic template is just nice and easy because you can see through it. But if you have the paper one, that works just as well. Just make sure you have a 1/4 inch extra hanging on the top before you mark placement for your handles. I'm actually gonna add my handles later after I attach the zipper. You can follow along and see how that works. I find it easier to attach the handles after attaching the zipper, but if you want to attach them now, you can. Just remember, lower them down a 1/4 inch. Okay, first things first, let's mark some midpoints. I'm gonna mark the midpoints on the top and the bottom of each of my exterior panels and my lining panels. All right, so first thing I wanna do is attach my bag tag. So I'm gonna pick one of my exterior panels to be my main panel. I'm gonna grab my bag tag and some double-sided tape. Put the tape over the back. And you can really add your bag tag wherever you want. Just remember that right around the bottom here, this is gonna be pinched. So don't add it right down here. That's gonna be the bottom of the bag. So this is gonna be pinched up. And then remember, you're gonna lose a little bit on the top as well from the seam, and also it'll be pinched. So I'm gonna measure down about 3.5 inches and use my midpoint on the top edge to help me center my bag tag. This is gonna be a little bit on the lower side, but that's okay. And you can always choose to add your bag tag when you attach your handles. Actually, that's probably what I should be doing, but we're just gonna risk it. If you attach your handles, then you have a better understanding of where everything is, and you can attach your bag tag to go with that. But we'll just do it this way. If you're doing just the pouch, then you can attach it now. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along all 4 edges of my bag tag at 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm gonna keep the tails of the threads really long. So I'm not backstitching and I'm not cutting them down at the seam allowance. They're gonna stay very long, top and bobbin threads. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but I left the tails really long on the top thread and also back here on the bobbin thread, which you will never see on the stuff. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my bobbin thread and I'm just going to gently tug it until I can see it pulling the top thread to the back. And then once I see that little loop of top thread coming, I'm going to grab a stiletto and just pull up that top thread so it's on the back side. I'm gonna do that with the other bobbin thread and top thread as well. There we go. Now I have all 4 threads here on the back. Can you see? And so now what I'm gonna do is just split them into 2 and 2. Doesn't matter which or where. And I'm just gonna tie 3 tight knots to hold this in place. And then you can cut off the long tails. And now when you flip this to the right side, you have a beautiful top stitching finish, and you can't even see where it started and stopped because you don't have any back stitching, and it all meets up, and it's a really clean finish and it's very secure. So that's how I attach my bag tag. All right, now let's work on attaching this zipper. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my exterior front panel and I'm going to grab some 1/8 inch wide double-sided tape, and I'm going to lay it right along this top edge all the way from corner to corner. So now with my exterior front panel laying right side up and my zipper up here on top, I'm going to remove the paper from my double-sided tape. And if you prefer to just baste this on instead of using double-sided tape, you can. But I'm gonna take my zipper tape and I'm gonna lay it right side down over that top edge. Now, I want the overhang to be on the right side of my material because that's where I'm going to attach the zipper pull later. So I'm pretty much just gonna line up the left corner of my zipper, right sides together with my exterior. And then I'm just gonna tape this along that top edge, just like that. And like I said, if you don't want to use double-sided tape, then just go baste this down at 1/8 inch seam allowance. However, if you're gonna stick with the tape method like I am, take your lining panel and lay it right side up, and then grab some double-sided tape and add it to the very top edge of your lining panel. And now with your exterior panel right side up, zipper wrong side up, grab your lining panel and remove the paper from your double-sided tape. Now take your lining panel and lay it right side down and tape the top edge to the top edge of the zipper, making sure you're matching up corner to corner with the exterior panel. So you're still gonna have the zipper overhang on the edge, but the lining and exterior panels should line up exactly. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along this top edge here from corner to corner of our panels at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have those sewn together, press your lining panel away from the zipper. I like to give it a little finger press, and then pull back the exterior panel so it's wrong sides together with the lining. Line up the bottom corners. I like to use some clips to keep it nice and straight so I know that I'm straightening out the seam really nicely. There we go. And then give a good press along the top edge here. If you want to use an iron, you definitely can to get it nice and flat. But now I'm going to take this back to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch right along the material at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now we're going to repeat that with the back panel. I'm going to take my exterior back panel, lay it right side up, and apply my 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape along the top edge. Remember, this is optional. You could just baste this on instead of taping it. And if you're wondering why I'm using the double-sided tape instead of basting, I find that I have less shifting when I use the double-sided tape. When I baste and then sew, sometimes my material kind of shifts away from one another and it's not exactly where I want it. When I do everything taped together and just sew once, it ends up pretty clean and crisp and perfect. So if you haven't tried it, I suggest you do. So now with the paper off the tape, lay your exterior panel right side down. You're going to line up the top edge with the long edge of the zipper, and you're going to make sure you're also matching up the sides with the sides of the front panel, okay? Don't have it off to the side. It needs to match up exactly. Okay, so that's taped in place. Now I'm going to flip my unit over so I'm looking at the back side of my zipper tape. And then I'm going to grab my lining panel here. And I'm going to lay it right side up and apply double-sided tape to the top edge of this lining panel. And you could definitely use quilt cotton for this lining panel. If you prefer, you do not have to use water-resistant canvas. So now I'm going to take the paper off my double-sided tape, and I'm going to lay my lining panel right side down over the back of the zipper, lining up the top edge with the zipper edge and also lining up the sides with the other sides of the lining panel. All right, once you have these taped in place and everything is squared up, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this taped edge or basted edge, clipped edge, whatever you're using right now. Sew along that edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And just like before, we're going to gently press the lining and exterior panels away from the zipper tape and pull them so they are wrong sides together. I'm going to add some clips along the bottom box corners, lining them up. And this just ensures that everything ends up straight and not twisted. And then just give a good press right along that seam by the zipper, and we can take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along that seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now the bag is sewn to the zipper. I'm going to work on the handles next. If you're not doing handles, just skip over to the next section. There are timestamps down below. So now let's build our handles. So I'm going to take my 2 little D-ring connectors, and they are very skinny. And since I'm using 1/2 inch wide D-rings, I have 1/2 inch wide connectors. Pay attention to the original pattern. If you're using 1 inch wide or 3/4 of an inch wide D-rings, your connectors need to be the same width. But I'm going to thread it through and then pull them wrong sides together. I'm going to grab some clips and just clip along that short edge to hold it in place. I'll repeat this with the other one. There we go. And just clip in place. Okay, I set those to the side. Now I'm going to grab my cuts for my handles, and if you want to use webbing for your handles, you definitely can. You don't have to sew your own handles. So in the end, I want my handles to be 1/2 of an inch thick, 1/2 of an inch wide. And I want them to be as thin as possible because I don't want to have to sew on a lot of bulk to my bag. So to do that, what I do is I cut my handle twice as wide as what I want it to be in the end. So for example, these handles are 1 inch wide, and then I'll fold them back once, and then I'll end up with a 1/2 inch wide handle. This does mean that in the end, on the back side of your handle, you do have the raw edges. I don't have a problem with that. However, if you do and you want to double fold this instead, what you'll do is you'll just make your handles 4 times as wide as what you want in the end. So for example, if I wanted a fully finished handle, no raw edges on the back, this would be 2 inches wide, and I'll show you with this one. You would fold both of the long edges back to meet in the middle, like I'm going to show you, and then you would fold it again. We've done straps like that before. It's just a lot bulkier with vinyl, which is why I'm not doing it that way personally. But if you want to, you can. So now I'm going to grab my 1/4 inch wide double-sided tape, and I'm going to place it right over that midpoint mark. So on the wrong side of each of these handles, I marked a line going right down the center. So it's 1/2 of an inch from either long edge. And then I'm going to remove the paper from that tape. and then fold the raw edges back, wrong sides together, and stick it to that tape. I find that I usually also have to add clips, especially with vinyl, and with how skinny this is. It just doesn't have a whole lot of space to stay folded. So tape and clips I find really helpful. So I'm just gonna go down this edge, folding both long edges back. You see with how skinny this is, when I do the second long edge to meet the first one, I can just kind of angle my clip so it holds both of them down. You don't have to put clips along both sides. So you see on the back here, I don't know if you can see, but I have the raw edges meeting right in the middle, but if I flip this over on the right side, it's just nice and clean with the folded edges. Repeat that with your other handle. Okay, once you have them both prepped, you're going to flip them over so you're looking at the top side of your handles, and we're going to top stitch along both long edges of both handles at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once you have those top stitched, grab your D-rings with connectors. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach one to each handle. So first what we're going to do is we're going to flip our handles so they are wrong sides up, and then grab one of your connectors, and with the raw short edge facing the edge of your handle, line them up edge to edge, corner to corner, and clip in place. So it should look just like that. Repeat this with the other handle and other D-ring connector. You are not attaching 2 D-rings to one handle. 1 D-ring per handle. Now we'll go to the sewing machine, and you can just sew these down at about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I forgot to show this in the beginning, but the Beacon 3-in-1 glue is also really helpful for this next part. So now we're gonna grab our little handle ends, okay? And on the wrong side, measure in from each short edge and just mark a midpoint line going between the 2 short edges. So it's just 1 inch in from the short edges. You know, I do this every single time. You need 4 of these, not 2. Every single time I do that, I always think I need 2. Tell you what, I have made this bag so many times, and definitely over half of the time, I have cut 2 handle ends and not 4. I don't know if you noticed, but even in the pattern, when I show the pieces, I show 2, not 4. It's my own pattern. What's wrong? So these ends for my 1/2 inch wide handle, these ends are going to be 1 inch by 2 inches each. And you need 1 end for each end of your handle. So that's 4. Duh. All right, so I suggest you go check out the first video where we use the clear vinyl, because we did discuss different options for these handle ends, how you can wrap them around the ends now and stitch them in place and then just rivet this onto the bag, or you can do what I'm going to show you, which is where we wrap it around, gluing it in place, and then stitch it onto the bag. Lots of options here. But if you're going to do the gluing method, you want to grab some good glue that's going to stick well. I always suggest Beacon 3-in-1 because it's super sticky, it holds it in place perfectly. It dries quickly, and it is easy to sew over if that ends up happening. And it does happen for me on this one because I do like to get the glue kind of close to the edges to get them as flat as possible. So I'm just going to add the glue. And if you're interested in edge coating any of this, go check out the first video. We go over that extensively. So I have one of my tabs here, wrong side up, with glue all over it and the midpoint line marked. I'm going to grab one end of my handle. It doesn't matter if it's wrong side or right side up. And I'm going to center it on this tab on the wrong side and match up the short end with that midpoint mark. So you see the handle is not as wide as the tab. It's not supposed to be. And now I'm just going to wrap this tab around that end, kind of move it around so all the edges match up and all the corners match up. And I'm going to use clips to hold this in place. And like I said, it's good if you get the glue close to the edge, because then it'll be a lot easier to keep it straight when you top stitch this on. So I have it looking just like that. So this is the back side, and here's the right side. So repeat that by adding these tabs to the ends of the other 3 pieces of your handles. Okay, so put these to the side, let that glue dry. Like I said, it won't take long, but we don't want to work with it when it's wet. So just set these to the side for a moment. So now we're gonna mark placement for where to put these tabs. And I'll go over this in the first video. We'll briefly talk about it here. I have 6 holes on each side of the template. You'll have this on the paper version as well. You don't need all 6 of them, you just need 4. You need 4 corners for our rectangles. So if you're using a 1 inch wide strap, you're going to have wider strap ends than what I'm using. So you're going to use the very outer 4 dots to mark placement for that wider strap. If you're using a 1/2 inch wide strap like I am, your width of your connector is going to be 1 inch. So you're going to use the inner dots very closest to the midpoint and then the ones in the middle. Okay, that's all it is. This is just if you're using a 1/2 inch wide strap, you're going to use these 4 dots. If you're using a 1 inch wide strap, you're going to use those 4 dots. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, so we went over what this line was for in the beginning, and that really is just for placement of your straps if you're doing them before you attach the zipper. If you're doing them after you attach the zipper, then you don't need that line. Because if you're doing them after you attach the zipper, you can really just line up this top edge of your paper template or acrylic template with the very top edge of your exterior panel. And when you do that, you should notice that the bottom edge here of your material lines up with that line now. So it's shifted down. It's perfect. It's exactly where we want it. So I'm just going to get this nice and lined up, and then I'm going to grab a marking tool and I'm going to mark in the 4 dots or holes. And if you're using the paper template, just make sure you poke out those dots with a stiletto or seam ripper or something, or even just a sharp pen, so that you can stick your fabric marking tool in there and mark this on your exterior material. Make sure you can see it in the end. Might be a little difficult for you to see, but I can see it. Now, important part, pull the lining panel out of the way, okay? We're not sewing the handles onto the lining, we're only sewing them onto the exterior, all right? So pull those out of the way, so you just have the exterior material here, and that's it. Now we're gonna grab one of our handles that's gonna go on the front panel. And I always like to attach my handle so the D-ring is on the left side. It will need to be the same process on the front and the back so that they end up diagonally across from each other. We'll go over that. So I'm gonna flip my handle over so I'm looking at the back side of my handle, and I'm gonna add a small cut of double-sided tape right on the back of my handle tab to hold this in place, okay? So it's on the back side of the handle. So now let's start with the end of the handle that has the D-ring. We're going to remove the clips from the sides. The glue should be dry now. And then we're going to take the paper off the back. Now, this is essentially a square. So we're gonna flip our handle so it's right side up, back side down. And on our little connector here, we have 4 corners of our square. And then remember, we marked 4 dots on the left side here using our template. Each corner is gonna line up with a dot. So just like this. And I know it's hard for you to see because of the print, but each corner is lining up with the dot. We're gonna sew this on one at a time. So now, again, lining panel's not back here, it's just the exterior panel. We're gonna take this to the sewing machine. I like to use a zipper foot here, and we're going to stitch around all 4 edges of our little connector at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do like to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and I also leave the threads long and tie them off in a knot on the back side, just like I did with my bag tag. Go slow here and just keep checking that your corners are matched up with your 4 dots. All right, isn't that pretty? Isn't this coming together so nicely? And if you find that it's like a little bit crooked, in the end, this bag, remember, bags are 3-dimensional shapes. This is not a flat bag. So in the end, the structure of the bag really hides any small problems. So don't worry if it's not perfect. The bag won't show that in the end. So now I'm gonna take my handle and I'm going to pull it down, keeping it straight. See, it's looping like that. Still right side up. Flip it over, take the paper off the back, remove your clips, and line up this connector corner to corner, matching up with those 4 dots. There we go. And once again, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching, tying off the threads on the back. So cute, right? Look at this little, look at that little beauty. So cute. So now we're gonna repeat that on the back panel. So flip your material. You can keep the lining for now so you can get that zipper nice and flat. Move the handle out of the way. So if you haven't already marked placement for your handles, you can do that now by grabbing your template of choice and lining up the top edge with that seam. And then once again, using your marking tool to mark in the 4 holes for the corners you need. And then before you forget, take that lining panel, move it out of the way. You really don't want to sew over that. It will cause a big headache later. You'll have to undo it. So keep the lining panel out of the way. Grab your remaining handle, lay it wrong side up, grab some double-sided tape, and add some tape to the back of each of the connector pieces, not this center handle portion, only the connectors or the tabs, whatever we're calling them. Okay, this is important. Start with the side that has the D-ring, okay? D-ring goes on the left. Always remember that, D-ring goes on the left. Whether it's the front panel or the back panel, D-ring goes on the left. And when you do that, you see how I lay this down? And you see my other D-ring? They're diagonally across from each other. Make sure that they are diagonal. If it's like this, your bag is gonna hang like this. It's not gonna be a good look. So, diagonal. Take the clips off of your tab, take the paper off of the tape, and then line up all 4 corners of your tab with the 4 dots that you marked. You should see it lines up with the handle you've already attached. Stick in place, just keep that other handle out of the way, and take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching, tying off the threads. Okay, you might notice that you're kind of wrestling the other handle a little bit while you're doing this. I find it's not too bad. It is something you have to pay attention to. And so you do have the option of attaching these handles on their exterior panels before you attach the panels to the zipper. I just find that when I did that, attaching the zipper with the handles already here was really difficult. So I would say this is probably the least difficult method. So pull your handle out of the way that you've already attached. Keep your handle you're working on straight, twist it down, remove the clips from the connector, take the paper off of your tape, and tape this down corner to corner with the other 4 dots. And once again, just top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch, tie off your threads. All right, there we go. Now you have your handles attached. It is so sweet, isn't it? It's so, so sweet. Okay, so now we're gonna finish up the bag. So if you are not attaching handles, welcome back. We're gonna finish up this bag now. I have handles here, just ignore them. So now what we want to do is we want to take our exterior panels and bring them right sides together and clip along the bottom edge. And we're only focusing on the bottom edge right now. And now fold everything else out of the way. So now we're going to sew along this bottom edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so if you want, you can just leave this bottom edge as is and then continue on building the bag. Or if you want the bottom to be really flat, and this is especially useful if you're using vinyl, then you're gonna wanna top stitch down that seam. So you see this shiny vinyl here. If I were not to top stitch this down, it would have kind of like a butt look like that. So I like it nice and flat. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. This is also why we haven't attached the zipper yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull my zipper away from one another, just like that. Completely open it, so that now I can flatten out my exterior panel real nice. And I'm gonna flip this over and I'm going to spread that seam open. Now, use an iron here if you'd like to iron this and get it nice and flat. I could because this is light material, but even just pressing it with my fingers flattens it out. And then I'm gonna flip this so I'm looking at the right side, and I'm just going to keep that seam pressed open and flat. And I'm gonna top stitch along both edges of that seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, flattening out the seam and getting a nice flat bottom. All right, so now we have that together. So now we're gonna pull our lining panels right sides together. So get that zipper to match up in the middle, just like that. And I'm not going to attach the zipper pull and close the zipper yet. I'll just do that in the end. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull my lining bottom panels or bottom edges right sides together and clip along this edge. So now I'm gonna grab a ruler and I'm going to mark a opening that is 4 inches wide and centered on the bottom of this lining panel. So it's pretty wide. It's almost as wide as the whole thing, but not quite. There we go. If you're using a lightweight material, you could get away with 3 inches. If you're using a vinyl or something, you would want it to be the 4 inches. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna sew from boxed edge to the mark on each side of that opening in the center at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the edges and also backstitching at those marks. Leave the center open and unstitched. Okay, now, this is a part you need to pay attention to. We're gonna sew this together, but we're not sewing over the zipper. So make sure you line up your zipper. I'm just gonna pull my zipper teeth up like this and line up seam to seam right at my zipper and clip along the sides of the exterior and sides of the lining. Let's get on the open side of the zipper. I'm just making sure the seams are matched up perfectly, and then repeat this for the lining side. Okay, pay attention. Grab a roller. at the seam where the stitching is. Okay, so not like the bottom of the zipper tape or anything. At the seam where you see the stitching, measure onto the exterior side 3/4 of an inch and make a mark. Okay, so it's 3/4 of an inch away from the seam on the exterior side. Do the same thing on the lining side. Measure away from the zipper on the lining side, 3/4 of an inch from the seam, and make a mark. So you see I have a mark above the seam and a mark below the seam, exterior and lining. Repeat for the other side. Now we're gonna sew from the boxed edge to the mark on both the lining and the exterior sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you're gonna go from one raw edge, for example on the lining of the box corner, go up to that mark, backstitch at the beginning and the end. You are not sewing over the zipper. You're not sewing over the zipper at all. That 1.5 inch opening right here on each side of the zipper, where it's 3/4 of an inch away from each side, you're going to leave that open. Do not sew between those marks. Backstitch well, do this on both sides. All right, okay, sides are done. Now we gotta box the corners. So I'm gonna start with the exterior, and I'm going to pull the two cut corners away from one another, bringing the bottom seam and the side seams, right sides together. And I like to press the side seam open with my fingers and line it up seam to seam with the bottom, and then add clips along this short edge that creates the box. I love box corners. I just do. It's just so smart. And I'm going to repeat this with the other box corner of my exterior. And you'll notice this is very different than how we construct this bag when we use the clear vinyl in the original pattern. So these are not the same instructions that are in the pattern because we're not using clear vinyl. We can kind of make this a little bit easier. So now I'm going to sew along both of these clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. If you're using vinyl or really thick material, do a second row of stitching just outside that first row, so just a little bit closer to the raw edges to reinforce those stitches. Okay, so now we're going to repeat that for the lining. So I'm going to spread these corners away from each other. And then for the lining, if you want, you can spread the seams open, or you can just rotate the bottom seam and the side seams in opposite directions. So they just kind of like hug in with one another. They just tuck in real cute and then just clip. Especially if you're using a lightweight material like I am for the lining, which you really should be. It doesn't add any bulk. It's not going to be difficult to sew over. So do this for both box corners. Remember, we still have that opening on the bottom. Leave that alone. All right, now I'm going to take this to a sewing machine, and I'm going to sew along these two edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to sew them a little bit bigger than the exterior so the lining isn't baggy. It kind of tucks in a little bit nicer. Okay, everything's sewn together. Reach in through your lining and pull the bag right side out. Make sure you're gentle with those handles. Don't rip them or anything. Okay, now I'm going to pull out the lining so I can reach in. I'm just going to grab a little turning tool here, and I'm going to poke out the corners of my exterior. How stinking cute is this? This is so cute. And then I'm just going to tuck in my lining. I just need to give this a good look. Also pull out the top ends of your zipper tape, so it should be easy to do on the short edge. But on the longer edge, just make sure you pull those long ends up and out. Here we go. Look at how cute this little bag is. Isn't that sweet? Oh my word. That's adorable. Okay, now we got to finish this up. Let's close the lining first. So pull your lining up so you're looking at the hole, and you should be able to just tuck your fingers into the edges, and then the raw edges should just fold in. If they don't fold in on their own, then just fold them in yourself. Just shove the raw edges of your lining material down into that hole so you have a nice clean fold, and clip along those folded edges. And now we'll top stitch along this folded opening, just closing it entirely at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, tuck that lining back in real nice. So get this bag everything flat as possible, all over the place. All right, and you'll notice that at the top of your exterior and lining panels, you have this opening here. That's okay. We're gonna secure that in just a moment. Now, for some of you guys, this might be the hardest part, but let me just tell you, if you're gonna be a bag maker, you gotta practice putting zipper pulls on zippers. It's a necessity. You gotta do it. So we're gonna go to the side over here with the long end, and we're going to kind of pull the zipper teeth together, just like that. Make sure it's one coil on top of the other, not like 4 coils on top of the other, then you're gonna have a crooked zipper. So one coil on top of the other. Take your zipper pull and insert it over the end of the zipper tape. I like to look from the top of my zipper pull, and I can see the coils, and I'm just making sure, like for me, the right coil is on top, And then I just kind of push down on my zipper pull like that, and then pull it like that. And then I look one coil on top of the other, nice and lined up. And then what I'm gonna do is actually pull it all the way off because I want the zipper closed on both ends for the next step. So I'm gonna go back to my tail. So this is the front panel and my zipper is gonna close moving towards the left. That's why I left the tail on the right. So now I'm gonna open up that tail a little bit and I'm going to reinsert my zipper once again with the right coil on top. And then just push it on the end. And now I'm gonna move my zipper to the very center and leave it. So now I have it fully closed end to end, just like that. Okay, set this to the side for just a moment. So now I've got my little pinched corner pieces and I'm using the version where you just fold it over because it's easiest for me. So I'm going to take it and just fold it in half, right sides out, straight edges together, corner to corner. And I'm just gonna clip around the rounded edges, not the straight edge. I'm gonna do this for both of them. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch around the rounded edge entirely, even the folded over bit at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, leaving the straight edge open and unsewn. All right, once you have these top stitched, if you had any movement or some of the sides just kind of don't line up perfectly, you can trim it down. And like I said, if you want to do edge coating on this, in the first video I go over exactly how to do that. Now I'm going to grab a lighter and I'm going to melt down my little thread tails, and I'm also going to just burn off the fuzz that's on the very edge of my vinyl. So it gives it a cleaner look without having to do the edge coating. Edge coating is going to look the best, but this is a good option too. So now I'm going to go back to my bag. I'm going to open it slightly on the inside and I'm going to reach in and I'm smushing down the corner at the top where my zipper is. So I'm making sure my zipper teeth are lined up with the side of the bag. So the seam on the side, make sure your lining is tucked in against the exterior. Everything is nice and flat. And I'm gonna grab a ruler and I'm gonna go from the top of my fabric. So if your zipper is overhanging a little bit, you're not going from the top of the zipper, you're going from the top of the fabric. You see how it creates this little triangle here, and then the top of the fabric is the top of the triangle. That's what we're focused on. And we're gonna measure 3/4 of an inch down from the top of that triangle, holding it flat. You see I'm holding it on the back too, nice and flat. And I'm gonna mark a horizontal line just like that. That's my stitch line. And now I'm gonna add some clips around it. Once again, making sure I'm catching the lining as well. So sometimes the lining can kind of tuck out of the way and then you'll stitch it down and then the lining's not in there. The lining needs to be in there too. So I'm gonna repeat this with the other side. I'll walk you through it because it's a little tricky. So I'm reaching in again and just using my finger. I mean, I can push it through that hole. But I'm using my finger to make sure my lining and my exterior are flattened, wrong sides together. And give it a good pinch. And you see how the zipper overhangs a lot. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about the top of my little triangle. So I'm gonna add my ruler here and I'm gonna measure 3/4 of an inch down and draw a line with some sort of fabric marking tool. And if you feel more comfortable doing 1/2 of an inch, that's fine too. You just wanna be able to prep this before we put those ends on. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm just gonna baste right over those 2 marked lines, just directly over them to hold this pinched top in place. So after you baste over that line, flip it over to the side seam underneath the zipper. And remember how we have the material not sewn all the way to the top. Your basting stitch should cover where the split starts or get very close to it. So if it's just above that, that's okay, but it should be holding that split, like it should be covering it. That you shouldn't have to worry about that edge anymore. So now if you have any zipper overhang, go ahead and trim it down. So you see you're already getting a look at the finished little poochy pouch. It's so cute. So now I'm gonna grab one of my ends and I just wanna give it a test run. I'm gonna just insert it over my corner and shove it in there. Here we go. It should be a pretty tight fit. That's what we want. We want it to be a nice tight fit. Make sure you're covering your basting stitches. Make sure it's covering the split, so you shouldn't see any raw edge material at all anymore. That split is now hidden underneath this. It should completely cover it. So I'm just gonna test out both of these, make sure they fit. Sometimes if your top stitching around this rounded bit is just too wide, because it's hard to top stitch around curves, but if you do the top stitching's too big, like you did more of a 1/4 inch than an 1/8 of an inch, you might find it doesn't quite fit, and you need to make new ones then. So it is important that you pay attention to that. Look how cute that is. Okay, now that I know they work, I'm gonna get some glue. I'm gonna open this up like a little empanada, and then I'm just gonna coat each side with my Beacon 3-in-1 glue, because I do not want to have to wrestle this at the machine. So the first thing I'm gonna do is melt down the edge of my zipper tape so it doesn't fray. And then I've got my little top piece here with the glue. Open it up all the way. Don't let it glue itself shut. Wrap it around that corner. Really shove it on there so it's completely covering the basting stitches. And then I'm just gonna add a couple clips too to help it, just in case I hit it or anything, it won't come off. There we go. So now I'm gonna repeat that with the other corner, just gluing it on and then just shoving it over that corner. There we go. And then just clip it so it dries securely to your material. You get a really good look at your bag. Now, how cute! Now, once your glue is dry, we're gonna take this back to the sewing machine and we're just gonna top stitch along the bottom straight edge. So we've already done the curve, that's secure. We're just gonna top stitch right along the bottom straight edge of our little top accent at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end, and take your time. Good luck. And there you go, the little purse, the pouch is done. If you're not making a crossbody strap, you're completely done. And you see how that water-resistant canvas gives this bag really great structure on its own so it doesn't flop down on itself. Even though I use lightweight material and I've got these vinyl handles that can be kind of heavy, it still holds its shape. How cheerful is this stinking bag? All right, last thing I'm gonna do is make a strap. If you've done this already, you're done. But if you've never seen this, I'll show you how I do it. So we have template sets that we use to create these. I don't have one on hand, so I can't show it to you, but they're very helpful. So here's what we're gonna do. First, we're gonna attach our swivel hooks to our little strap end accents. So I'm just gonna thread this through the swivel hook, and you'll see that the swivel hook matches up perfectly in the center, but then it gets wider on the top. That's what we want. So do this for both of them. Swivel is on the right side of the material, or the hook. The hook is on the right side of the material, just like that. All right, we have those. Now, just like with zipper tape, I like to melt down the ends of my webbing because it does fray. So I am not gonna use rivets for this, which I normally would, but I know not everybody has that. So I'm just gonna use glue and then I'll stitch it in place. So I'm gonna add some glue to the back of my little strap end, just like that. And I'm going to glue this on to one end of my short strap, making sure you wrap it around and it's centered. If you want to draw a midpoint line, you can, but I find I don't really need to. I'm just gonna wrap it around and clip it so the glue can dry. I'm going to repeat this with my long strap, just once again adding this little end to one edge of my long strap. So once your glue is dry, I'm gonna take the shorter strap and the end that has the strap end, I'm gonna wrap that around the rectangle ring and just bring it all the way over, just like this. Add some clips to the side to hold it in place. So now with it wrapped around that rectangle ring and clipped to the other side of the webbing, I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along all four edges of my accent piece at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so rectangle ring on the short strap. Now we're gonna work with the longer strap and the strap adjuster. So this is like a little slider to make your strap longer or shorter. Make sure the glue's dry. You're gonna thread the end that has the tab up the bottom and over that middle bar of your adjuster and just wrap it around so that the tab gets pretty close to the top. So what I like to do is I like to pull the hardware towards the left and then pull the strap down, because when I take this to the sewing machine, my needle can only get it can't get that close to the middle bar. It can only get as close as the right side of that adjuster, you know what I mean? Because it's gonna lay flat. So I'm gonna get it where I want it, clip it in place, and then just top stitch around this end at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, holding the end of the strap with the tab to the other side of the webbing. All right, now we want to attach our swivel hooks. So make sure you have your hooks attached to your little accent piece here. And we're going to flip our short strap right side up. And then I'm gonna add some glue to the wrong side of each side of my fancy strap. And with these ones, since we're going from a wide strap down to a more narrow hook, you actually want to cut just a little 45-degree angle right on the corner of your webbing to help it stay in place. And when you do that, just make sure you melt it down. There we go. So now with the glue side up, you should be able to lay your webbing with the little pointed bit over it. And the width of the webbing before you cut it down should be hidden by the very top of the fancy strap. So then just wrap this around. So you shouldn't have any corners peeking out on the bottom sides here. And you shouldn't have anything peeking out on the top sides. You see how that works? I have a whole video going over how to do these fancy straps, including how to use fabric if you don't want to use vinyl, how to wrap it around some Decovil. I actually forgot to put stabilizer on this. Oh well. Normally you'd want to put a little scrap of Decovil light right along the center of this, but I forgot. That's okay. This is going to be a really lightweight bag. This is not going to be holding heavy things, so I think we'll be okay. Okay, so don't attach the other one yet because we need to thread this through the rectangle ring. So take your short unit and lay it right side up. For me, right side is where you can't see the tab. Lay it right side up. Grab your long strap and lay it wrong side up. So wrong side is where you can see the tab. And you're going to take the edge that has nothing, thread it around your rectangle ring, and then fold it back towards the strap adjuster. So here's our hook over here. Here's this. Slide it up on the side that has the tab, up from the bottom of your adjuster, up and over and down the other side. So this is what it should look like. Swivel, right side up, short edge, right side up, adjuster, right side up, nothing, okay? So now we're gonna grab our other fancy strap and some glue, scissors, and a lighter. And once again, we're going to very carefully trim down the corner of our webbing at about a 45-degree angle. Don't go too far, and you can just kind of test it out too. If you cut it at too deep of an angle, it's going to be too much. And then if that happens, like if you cut this and then you try to lay it over, and let's say you have a cut edge hanging out the top because you just cut it too long, that's okay. Just cut down the short bit. You'll be okay. There's a lot of room for error here because goodness knows I do a lot of errors. All right, and just like before, we're going to take our glue and we're gonna smush it all over the back of our fancy strap. And I think I forgot to do this. Make sure you light the edges of the webbing that you cut. And then lay this over the wrong side of your fancy strap accent, making sure that all the cut edges are completely enclosed with the vinyl. And then wrap this around. Make sure all the sides meet up. Make sure it looks fairly centered and straight. And then just add some clips so it can dry to the webbing. All right, there we go. Now let that dry. Now once the glue is dry, take this to the sewing machine. I like to use a zipper foot here and top stitch around all the edges of your fancy strap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Get as close as you can to the hardware without actually hitting it. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. And there you go. Fancy strap all done. Grab your cute little purse. Hook this on. How stinking cute, right? Look at that. It's just so pretty. So one thing I just noticed, I don't know if you guys can see. Yeah, it's kind of picking it up. There's like little threads, little pigtails. Don't leave those. Whatever you do, don't ever leave little threads like that. It's not a good look. It's like one of the biggest signs that this is kind of like homemade. So always just take that moment to light it with your lighter and melt those down. And if you still wanted to edge coat this part here, you definitely could. You still have the opportunity to do that. Just be very careful because edge coating is not going to wipe off of quilt cotton. So if you spill it or anything, you're in trouble. How cute is that? If you make this, please let me know and please send me a photo. I want to see your version. I hope you guys like this. I tell you what, every single time I make one of these little cuties, it's my favorite one. This is my new favorite one. Look how stinking cheerful this is. So I'm going to take the crossbody strap off. Or first, let me just show you. This is how it looks. But I'm going to take the crossbody strap off because it is a little heavy. And I want to show you the structure of this bag without adding like stabilizer. I mean, I wouldn't consider batting a stabilizer. Maybe you would. But you see, this is that Liberty of London lawn, super, super silky, drapey, thin material. All I did was quilt it. I didn't even add woven interfacing to it. All I did was quilt it to some batting, kind of like a little mini quilt. That's it. And the structure, you see how, like, look at this. It doesn't flop down on itself. It keeps its structure really well. That structure is coming pretty much entirely from our lining. So that's something I just really try to encourage to bag makers, and especially beginner bag makers, is that your material can save you money. Like, using water-resistant canvas, you get a lot. A yard of water-resistant canvas is a lot bigger than a yard of standard quilt cotton, okay? So you get a lot of material, it's not terribly expensive, and it acts as a lining or exterior and a stabilizer. It has structure, it has firmness, but it's not thick. It's not hard to sew in a domestic machine. It's seriously the secret to so many great bags. But it's what is making this bag hold its shape. And then just a little bit of vinyl here and there. If you don't want to add the handles, you don't have to. You can just make it a pouch, a cute zipper pull. Bada bing, bada boom, you're done. Like, right? This is a pretty simple, adorable little make. So I cannot wait to see what you guys do with this. I feel like there's so much. You know me, I want to do some applique on this. I want to get some embroidery involved on this. I want to make a bazillion two-toned versions. The holidays are coming up. This is like my little summer ween. This is like Christmas ween, isn't it? Like, what would you call that? A hollow miss? I don't know. But it's like a combination of holidays, and I am here for it. Thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.